I would like to dive into our esteemed panel here because you have so much to say. So before we dive into these key areas, my first question is, how do you see varying differences in how people define sustainability for their businesses? Randy, since you consult with a lot of businesses in the space, why don't you get started?
Yeah, with the clients and the people I work with over the decades, sustainability, first of all, it's great that it's become part of the mainstream. 25 years ago, it was just something out there to talk about. Right?
Amen.
So now it's becoming more and more part of the mainstream, but it's often defined by the paradigms in which most people operate within and business operate within. And really there's 4 dimensions you have to take into account when you're looking at sustainability. First and foremost, you got to look at the impacted ecosystem and ecozones. Okay? That's the flora, the fauna, and that includes human beings, right? Because all of those, in part, are stakeholders. The next dimension is your legacy waste sites, right? Because if you look across North America, majority of y'all remember Superfund sites, which there still are, right? Road landfill sites, mining sites, and so forth, which to this day continues to produce legacy issues to clean water, right? In a massive way, as well as clean air. The second thing is current operations. How do you operate today? What are the externalities of that operation, right? And what are their pathways into that impacted ecosystem and ecozone? And then how are you going to do plan development? Sustainability needs to be a thread through all of those. And I do see clients, I got one client that makes cheese, and basically they have a zero to landfill policy. So every byproduct they make from making cheese, they turn it into another product to take to market, including nutritional whey, other stuff, as well as basically when they're done with the waste becomes backfiller in your pet's food. So sustainability is going to vary depending on who you talk to, but it's got to be taken within the context of those 4 dimensions. And you can have a centralized strategy, but your tactical solutions are going to be decentralized because it's all about that impacted ecosystem.
Kelly, do you have anything to add?
Well said. And we're going to have some fun today because there's been lots of caffeine earlier. So we've got a couple of labs. The question was really around, what do we see in businesses as far as differences across sustainability? Honestly, a testament of all of you here is, quite frankly, a testament to the importance of ESG and sustainability. I had the privilege of working in the financial services sector very early on in my career. Had the opportunity to lead strategy for an international asset management company, and then worked for a technology conglomerate who was one of our terrific sponsors. Very proud. And I can tell you, with all of those different experiences, working with the C-suite at the top of the house, really leaning in, as Randy mentioned, in that enterprise fashion. It's really about people, planet, and profits. And I'm thrilled to spend a little bit of time in our work with Sustene Global. We're an environmental advisory capital company. We're working with folks like Randy and others across North America and the globe to really build out these master planning, net new opportunities. But having that strategic foresight at the top of the house is really key in being able to build that platform from a federated model to a centralized model is going to be part of that equation.
So, Mike, question to you then. We talked about some of the key areas that we identified, one of them being the supply chain sustainability. So what are some of the challenges that enterprises are facing in implementing sustainability initiatives beyond their 4 walls? So, some of the areas that they've identified are, of course, the supply chain complexity, which you can talk with authority, green IT, organizational changes, and communities, and maybe even cost. So why don't you kick it off with supply chain for us?
Yeah, the complexities that I see really revolve around data and information. The ability to accurately calculate the carbon footprint of a supply chain with all the various levels. You've got your direct suppliers, your tier 2, your tier 3, your your indirects. It's very difficult to get that data. I am seeing, though, over the last couple of years, there's better reporting, better information being put out by many companies that will allow us to get there. But that's been probably the biggest challenge, because in many cases, your direct suppliers don't want you to know their supply chain. They don't want to know who they're getting their products, their services from. And so their willingness then to share that data and share that footprint becomes a very big challenge.
Any examples you want to give us?
Well, yeah, that was one of my big initiatives, was how can I determine the carbon footprint of my supply chain at Fluor Corporation. And so I started talking first to my indirect suppliers, and what I found was they weren't doing it any better than we were. They were any further along than we were. But then I started talking to our direct suppliers, and it was just a wall. They did not want to go down that path of really revealing their entire value chain and then the carbon footprint of that.
Right. Randy, from your experience?
There's a lot of data out there that's available to be able to calculate that. And the challenge is not so much the data, but it's the harmonization and the collection of that data. There's not only data in regards to the externality of carbon, but there's also data in regards to the impact of that carbon. Right? But it's going to vary depending upon who you go to. And it's going to have to take a collaborative effort, not just in business itself, but also state and federal agencies, to get them to share that information. And I can tell you, sometimes when you're dealing with the federal agencies, there's walls between federal departments within a federal agency in sharing the data. That can be challenging, but we all just got through talking about innovation.
Right. So Kelly, what about other areas like green IT or organizational challenges or local communities impact the ecosystems, maybe cost?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. So as Mike and Randy both shared, continuing a little bit on the scope 1, 2, and 3 discussion, and then moving into the green IT, it's really been a challenge for for-profit entities, community, the like, to have that single source of truth. I mean, one of the questions I received was, Kelly, how did you get into sustainability and why is it important? Well, it's interesting. I think, quite frankly, all of us here, we're here because we've been grappling with the digital transformation for years, right? And so every entity agnostic to the industry that you hold has been turning into that digital component, that IT really leading example. Well, now we're all grappling with how do we become the best net zero company by 2030, 2040, 2050? And what does that mean to scope 1, 2, and 3? And how do we really measure the right information at the right time with the right source? So that was a long-winded way of saying, to Mike's point, there isn't a one-size-fits-all. But boy, having gone on a couple of field trips over the pond in the last 12 months, there are some other countries and organized ways from a regulatory standpoint that I think is going to be interesting for North America to embrace, and we can start doing our homework now.
Yeah, and tap to that. There is no one size fits all. But if you look at our regulatory statutes that we have here in the United States, right, it's predominated by RIPRA, CERCLA, TSCA, right, Substance Control Act, Clean Air, Clean Water, and it assumes it equates it all, releases in parts per million across the entire United States. Well, the United States is not all one environment, right? We got Arizona, the Southeast is totally different, right? So you got to look at it, and I'm going to get real nerdy on everybody, but you got to look at the biogeochemical processing capacity to handle those externalities. And that data and that information is there. It's just tapping into it and understanding how to leverage it to minimize any excess externality beyond the ecozones, right? Ecosystem's ability to consume it and process it, if it makes sense, right? From a shop floor, you don't plan at 120% of your shop floor's ability to produce, right? Then why would we put 120% plus on our environment's ability to process it?
And do you think that partnerships would be beneficial as well?
Partnerships are key because it's all about sharing of the data, right? And collaboration and innovation.
Right. All right, so we all have been talking about net zero, and we've heard about it, I think every individual here probably knows something about net zero, has talked about it.
So just by challenging kind of the standard thinking that we would have, that insetting, not offsetting, so it's not like you're planting trees or you're buying carbon credits, but actually insetting and helping your supply chain, your suppliers, reduce their carbon footprint, helps you reduce that for yourselves.
Andy?
Mike's made a very good point, and it's something I think that needs to be obvious up here rather than underlined. Sustainability, everything we're talking about up here, you're going to move from a linear-based thinking to circular. And that's really going to be key, is understanding how that waste stream or those externalities can be reused within an organization or sold on the secondary market to another organization. Right now, all of a sudden, that waste stream is no longer a liability. It becomes a source of revenue, right? And it's not something you have to worry about 20 years down the road.
Yeah, but I want to go back to something that you mentioned on smart cities. So how can smart city technologies be used to improve energy efficiency and to reduce carbon emissions? And Randy, I'm sure you can talk a lot about it too.
Yes, I think between the three of us, when you think about the concept of smart cities, as Randy had mentioned before, it's really this holistic, and a lot of folks will align smart cities to the digitization around it. Well, we can also think about the physical assets as well, right? So the physical assets that we're building in addition to the digital connectivity, bringing all of those pieces together. One of our clients we're working with right now, we are, you'll appreciate this, it's a solar renewable energy organization, a gubernatorial candidate in the South, launched this entity, and it's a coal to solar program, which is fascinating. So as we're decommissioning coal plants and coal sites, we're really leaning into the renewable piece there. Well, taking that a step further, we're going to be building out this holistic smart city design around connectivity from not only the monetization components. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of what's called PPAs, the power purchase agreements, and working in concert with utilities, but also independent farmers, and bringing, quite frankly, another, so to speak, revenue stream and crop to the table. We've got soybeans, we've got corn, but we also have solar and renewable energy. So how might we build revenue accretive models for independent folks across North America that can connect back into the grid? So again, that's, in my opinion, somewhat of an example of some type of smart city type of ecosystem.
And also like a circular economy, almost to what you said. Randy? What's your comment on that? Do you have any comment on it?
Oh, most definitely, because I think, at least and then just talk about this. I live and breathe this stuff. I'm an accredited investor. I invest in sustainability technologies, and there are a lot of them out there that can help us. Y'all might be familiar with microgrids, right? Which putting in local neighborhoods, right? Here in California, you have these rolling blackouts. Why? We're talking decades later. Microgrid technology's been around for more than 2 decades, right? That could eliminate these rolling blackouts. 1, 2, solar, wind. I have a place that's totally off grid. It runs off solar, and I'm going to put a wind turbine in this coming summer, right? And I would love to be able to hook it up. There's technologies for wireless transfer of energy, right? And share this with my neighbors, right? And say, well, share with me. There's plenty of options, plenty of opportunities to take existing legacy cities and make them smart, clean cities.
Ask Randy to see his picture. It's absolutely beautiful.
Picture of it, please. Mike, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I'm not as well versed in smart cities as my colleagues here on the panel, but I was involved, again, at Ford Corporation. They own NuScale, which is a small modular nuclear reactor company. And nuclear to a lot of people is a bad word, but I will tell you that if we're going to have solar, we're going to have wind, we're going to have hydro, we have to have some other clean fuel that can supplement that, because when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, we all still need power. And what's really fabulous about this new technology, it's intrinsically safe. It can withstand an airplane crashing into it. It can withstand hurricanes and tornadoes. And what's great about it is, a typical nuclear station, you have to have a 10-mile zone around that because of safety. These, you can put in the middle of the city. The zone is literally the size of basically a natural gas powered plant. You can replace that with this small modular nuclear reactor and have that right in the middle of the city. So I think that offers exciting technology that could really change the way we have the ability to use some of these clean fuels. Yeah, I guess, from my standpoint, it's always important to have a level playing field. And I think that's where Randy touched on it. There's some of these regulatory policies, regulations that are going in that are going to define how it's measured, how it's reported, are going to help make it consistent across the playing field. And clearly, you don't want one company to be disadvantaged over another. And that's where I think the regulations are going to come into big play and help us clean up a lot of that information.
Right, Kelly?
You bet. I'm going to lean in with an example because I see one of my colleagues in the room here. This is something we worked on together. So bringing this to life, reporting and the regulation piece, we worked with a nonprofit where we gathered a significant amount of data, health data in particular, and so build out a technology platform that enabled not only the enterprise, of course, to understand the data, but also scientists and educators that were working on the data. So created this environment of chief science officers to go in and to play and to start modeling what might be those, proposed future states. We had the opportunity to spend some quality time at the WHO overseas, and this terrific, I'll give the example, it's a micro program called the Periodic Food Table Initiative that Rockefeller Foundation and others have sponsored. And so bringing this full circle, using technology to understand the data, understanding the macro, micronutrients of food, and going back to supply chain, understanding, the pieces of where and how the food is grown, and ultimately that true transparency linkage across all of it. So in my opinion, that's a great example of understanding platform technology to bring that to life. And what will only happen will be the exasperated regulatory environment to which we'll have to measure that.
Right, and Randy, you have a ton of examples, so please go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things I would say in regards to ESG reporting, if you look at it as a compliance requirement, if you treat it like SOX, it will become an overhead burden and will add no value to your organization, okay? It's not measuring externalities, but it's measuring the impacts, the what's, right? That's going to be really critical to a successful ESG program as well as sustainability program. Measuring the impact, okay? That's going to be the big difference. And you can set up, when you talk about a regulatory environment, you can set up a carrot and stick around measuring the impact rather than measuring how that impact occurred. Too often we get caught up, especially our regulatory statutes, in measuring how things are done, not what the result is. And when that's a shift, we need to measure the what's, right? And let the free market innovate on the hows.
Can either of you give us an example of an organization, if you don't want to name the entity, that's fine, who are doing an amazing job with reporting, measuring and reporting?
Oh gosh, there's a lot of great organizations out there. I was just reading, you can hear my voice in not necessarily giving a name, but there's quite a few entities out there that are really leaning in with wanting to become a leader in the space. The interesting thing about this is that there isn't, in my opinion, a North Star where not only the globe or specific countries or regulatory bodies are behind. So it's really hard when you look at the dimensions and you look at a materiality assessment, so to speak, and the scoring that's starting to take shape. Based on the source that you look up as far as who the leader is, as I see smiles out in the audience, it's clear that there's quite a bit of variation across that spectrum.
See a lot of notes, Randy?
Well, it was interesting. We were putting a proposal into a flavored fragrances company, and so I was doing my due diligence on them. I went through their annual report. I was actually quite impressed because right there on the first page of their annual report was a scorecard, and it wasn't just financial. They talked about their carbon footprint. They talked about their scope 1, their scope 2, their scope 3. And I think that actually kind of surprised me a bit, but I think that's where we're starting to see, like Randy said, more and more of this reporting is starting to happen. And people are taking that opportunity to report on their own scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions.
Go ahead.
I can give you some examples of some companies, but one of the things that really come to mind, I got a client, and they've been for decades a hardware company, but they made HVACs, right, and control systems. And it was until recently they realized the value of becoming a digital service provider, monitoring and so forth, on that equipment for those installation bases for their customers, because they realize how much value is going to be in that market. So now they're transforming themselves from being a hardware, install maintenance provider to a digital service provider on those platforms.
Right.